Ex-homeless Redditors. What was the scariest thing that you ever saw on the streets? NSFW. A woman giving birth at a bus terminal. Cold weather. I thought I was going to die one night. I was so cold. I remember waking up thinking, you need to move or you are going to die. My brother was homeless. He was hit by a car and died on the sidewalk. I was there 5 minutes before and 5 minutes after it happened. Had to identify his body for the cops and ambulance. I'm still frocked up about it. Kids beating the shit out of a homeless man. Started with them spitting on him. He gets up and runs after them. Then a couple of them hit him from behind with some IKEA-looking wood. You know, the one that snaps easy. He gets mad and they run off. He comes back to the bench and falls asleep again. 10 minutes later they're back and they just start beating the frocking shit out of him. I had to jump in and stop them. Lots of stabbings and rapes. I was stalked by a gang one night on my way home from work. I still have no idea how I wasn't raped or mugged. Once I woke up suddenly to a not homeless man holding a huge knife staring at me inside the abandoned building's basement I was sleeping in. Once he noticed I was awake, he asked if I was Russian. I said no and he said he was looking for a different girl. Gave me $20 and left. Edit. If you can read this and immediately think, yes, it's the best idea to send this woman disgustingly perverse messages and ask for denudes. I hope your digs stay flaccid for eternity. Was homeless for a summer and an acquaintance through the party scene of the town invited me to crash on her couch. Woke up in the middle of the night to her screaming into her phone about how they are out to get her and are setting the world up for destruction. Pretended like I was still asleep and got out of there the next day real quick. I saw a really angry bald man aggressively masturbating his flaccid dig. TBH, that was probably the most scary thing. People who had been homeless way longer than me. Trust me. There is nothing scarier on the streets than the meth couple who this has been their day in and day out for 1000s of days. Snow. I'm a big, scary dude, so I never had trouble with people picking on me or whatever. In that sense the streets were safe to me. But seeing snow for the first time that year just made me cry and panic. It was too early for snow. I wasn't ready for that type of cold and was hoping to be on my feet again before the winter came. Beautiful thing like snow just frocked me up in so many ways. Biggest thing, 3,115 pounds, was how often people tried to abduct you. That and how often people try to serve you tampered food. The teenagers trying to get clout by assaulting, pranking you is another one. Everyone is gonna try to steal from your ass, so watch your sit. Keep your mouth shut and find a good place that is desolated from nocturnal animals and his holes. There is a drainage ditch in my area that the local homeless people tend to bed down in. A few years ago, when I found myself destitute, I spent one night down there. That night I witnessed a Molotov get thrown into another dude's spot, which led to a huge fire that ran rampant through the area. Yeah. I bought a tent the next day and started camping in the local mountains. In my years being a homeless junkie and then cleaning up kinda and working at a homeless shelter, on the street, I saw a dude try to murder his girlfriend with a machete. Like full-on swing and barely miss, and my heart was frocking pounding like I was sure I was about to witness a murder. I also saw countless odds and sit. Saw a girl beaten to sit who had just been raped asking for help. Saw a dude get stabbed. Saw a big huge dude have a heart attack and die and the paramedics frantically trying to give him chest compressions and sit and he was just flopping around. Saw a lot of sit honestly, but those were the ones that come to mind as scaring the shit out of me the most. I have a million stories from those years and half sound fake cause they are so ridiculous. So I lived in my car, but I remember seeing this woman and talking to her outside a store when I was just chilling eating some food, and she told me she had been homeless literally her entire life and had never slept on a proper bed in her life. I asked how old she was. She told me she was 53. It was scary to me because I realized that that could have easily been me. I think about that woman every single day. I've never been homeless, but I work in a homelessness service. One of my colleagues had been homeless and was telling me about it. He said he had a sleeping bag and a small tent in the woods that he used to sleep in. I said I would be too scared to do that. He then tells me when sleeping in a city center he was pissed on multiple times and was set fire to once, and he would rather take the very slim chance of bumping into a killer looking for people in a forest at night. People are frocking digs. This isn't remotely scary. It's more just frocked up. After we lost our home, we stayed in a motel for a while, but due to occupancy rules I slept in the car in the parking lot. One night a woman parks next to me in the lot, and the security guard shows up, and they literally spent the next 3 hours getting high, talking, and then frocking in the car. The entire time I'm in the next parking space trying to ignore them and look at my phone. I don't know if it counts, but I lived in a van for a month or so when I was in college, and would sleep at the park. I didn't necessarily see it, but I heard it, and it is burned into my mind forever. A group of the local hobos beat a guy near to death and they all raped his girlfriend, wife then beat her to death. I found a new park after that. LPT. If a random drug dealer asks you for a ride home, don't say yes. If you do say yes, have extra keys with you. Almost got raped after driving a random drug dealer. I bought drugs from home. Dude stole my keys out of the ignition and said he needed his dig wet if I wanted my keys back. Pretended to start crying to make things awkward. He got out of the car with my keys. Locked doors. Got my spare keys out and floored it out of there. Spent a good few months homeless after being robbed of all my money. If there are homeless women about, the scummiest dudes band together to create a rape gang and hunt the women all night. Some got away. Some did not. The police never cared. All sorts of the usual dicey situations with dicey people. But the one where I was spine-chilling terrified. I had found a seemingly nice quiet cut in the woods. Shade. Private. I'm set. I wake up to a most guttural yowl at 2 a.m. A pack of feral cats that the adjacent 50-year-old Rainman had lured to his property with cans of wet food. They stood on the fence yowling, eyes reflecting as we stared the other down. I was homeless in Hawaii for a month after I got out of the army. Nothing I saw was ever like Hosit I'ma die. But there are a lot of homeless meth heads wandering the streets. I watched people having arguments with a spoon they were holding. People eating sand at the beach. People wearing week-old sit-cake pants. Meth is frocking wild. Stick to weed and shrooms. Not scary but disturbing. Was walking trying to get to downtown for reason at night, possibly shelter, when this guy started to walk beside me. He followed me for 3 miles while playing with his dig beside me. Even when I made it downtown he still followed me and thought he was going to corner me and probably try and rape me. But he didn't notice I was walking us to a nearby building that had security until I yelled for help. He ran off immediately afterwards. I think everyone on this thread would appreciate Invisible People on YouTube. He interviews homeless people and you'd be shocked how homelessness really happens to regular people. I remember seeing 3 guys just basically playing with this poor girl a few years younger than me, 18 at the time, trying to see what she'd do for drugs. She was homeless too and very uninterested in them or the drugs. It wasn't scary like spooky or something. It was just that humans will resort to this insane base level of craziness. I did step in and they backed off, but that was one time I was able to step in as opposed to the many I wasn't. Dude jerking off in the night bus. Bedbugs from a shelter I stayed in for a few nights. I ended up hospitalized. I was once homeless for 4 to 5 days a few years back when I got lost in another city in Turkey where my family lost me. I had to go to homeless shelters since I didn't have my bag, had my phone, money, card, keys, ID, important stuff, and it was when the Turkish coup happened. I saw people being beaten and sometimes to death, gunfire, bombs, gas. I didn't have anyone to help since the police were busy. Everyone was busy. The scariest moment was when a military officer threw a few Molotov cocktails at the crowd. My cousins found me near the mosque they visited at midnight. I was sleeping behind a closed shop on a bench. I am fine and doing well, thank God. A friend of mine who was battling with addiction and living on the streets in Dallas, TX, told me he bought drugs in an abandoned home once and the guys there were holding a 14-year-old girl hostage, tied to a bed, and were selling her to people. I hope they got what they deserved. I watched a pregnant woman smoking crack at an abandoned house I had to rescue some family from once upon a nightmare. But quite frankly, after reading these comments, that's pretty frocking vanilla. I wasn't really homeless. Booty had to live in my car on and off for a couple months. In a mountain town due to scarcity of work available at the time. Woke up in the middle of the night to a black bear that was curious trying to get in. It's a long story but not that interesting, but long story short, I grew up in a very sheltered home. Through a series of unfortunate events. I became homeless. For someone who didn't know anything about the world. Seeing people use drugs openly, eat garbage, cry themselves to sleep on a park bench, kill themselves, etc. I grew up real quick. When I'd get ready to sleep, I'd roll my windows up on some sheets to block out everything except part of the driver's side window so I could see out just a bit and have a view of my side mirror. I had a dog. And while he was small, he was also mighty. And a very good boy. I'd sleep on my side in the backseat and he'd sleep in the nook of my arm. One night he started growling and it woke me up. As soon as I opened my eyes, I was looking directly into the eyes of someone else standing outside my car while they peered through the crack in the sheets. I asked, "What do you want?" and he bolted. While homeless. Before I joined the military, I was sleeping in either an abandoned factory or in my car at the time. While sleeping in the factory, I witnessed someone cracked out of their mind arguing with someone else cracked out of their mind arguing over who was going to take the last of the heroin that they had. I watched as someone slit their wrists with a needle, covering themselves in their own blood, saying that they were the sacrificial lamb and deserved to get the last hit. Needless to say, I joined the military a few days later. Group of kids hitting sleeping homeless people with rocks tied to sticks. Seattle, approximately 5 years or so ago. They killed a few. I didn't sleep for days. And I still hear the sound. Neighbors caught a homeless dude shooting seagulls out of the sky and hanging them on a clothesline. Called gaming warden. Shows up to arrest dude when confirmed. Dude says only means of feeding his family. Warden realizes true and not just doing for sport. Lets him off with warning with promise to never do again, as seagulls are a protected animal in these parts. When leaving, he asks with curiosity what a seagull tastes like. Dude says tastes like mix between spotted owl and California condor. In my car at a gym parking lot. Heard a scream so blood-curdling at 2 a.m. that I was equally scared and worried for the person. It went on for a minute and I looked out and saw a car driving slowly by the business front that it seemed to be coming from. I called the cops because if someone was in that much pain, it must be a mixture of overdosing on meth, crack, or stimulants and being hurt. Or just a prank by kids. Not on the streets but behind some garages in the apartment complexes where I had a place. What felt scary to me was the realization that I didn't have a place to go. Usually after a long day you can kick back and relax at home. The dread of knowing I still had to find a safe place to sleep where I wouldn't be found was such a daunting task at the time. Getting in an argument with a guy who then proceeded to beat the shit out of me. Don't know what was mostly scary. When he pulled a knife or crawling for safety without anyone helping me shortly before. I got out somehow. Don't even remember how. Another time I went to sleep at this crazy place we were hanging out. It was messy and filthy with comforters and pillows everywhere. My friend, now dead, died at 21 on the streets from bad ecstasy. Called on me right as I was falling asleep. He wanted to sing Michael Bublé with me. All right, I said. 10 minutes later the room was engulfed in flames. Has he not called on me, I know I'd be dead. That sits with me. A shame I couldn't save him in return. RIP CC. My mom and I were homeless from ages 5 to 8 years old. I remember the first night we slept on a beach when we still had our car. My mom parked us kinda close to the water. She took a handful of bars and passed out in the front seat. I stayed awake the whole night in terror, thinking that the ocean would just swallow us whole. I tried to wake her up several times with no success. My uncle used to be a doctor in an ER in the Bronx. He said the homeless would try to sleep on roofs or fire escapes because gangs had a tendency to set them in fire as they slept, just for laughs. The scariest thing was when I was crashing on a friend's floor and heard his boyfriend hitting him, and had to call the police to get them to stop, knowing that it would put me out on the street when I did. Other homeless people. But some of them are nice. Never been homeless, but I used to see a homeless addict couple in the city all the time. They'd either be passed out on the sidewalk or fighting each other in the middle of the street. Their favorite move was to grab the other, then spin them around and throw them. Kinda like a hammer throw, except they'd both be flung over a meter or two and completely unable to break their fall. Pretty scary seeing them repeatedly smash themselves against the road. Once the bus I was on almost ran them over. They'd also just start sprinting across busy traffic for no reason. One time the backpack the guy was wearing got stuck on a fence and he was begging for it. The fence. To release him. Probably thinking someone was holding him or something. Never homeless but made dumb mistake once. Went to concert in faraway town with no ride, place to stay. Spent a night in the bed of a truck. Woke up around 5 a.m. to people doing meth about 10 feet away. Unaware of my presence. When the sun finally rose, a homeless professional found me and took me to the donut shop that was open. She was such a boss. Seeing how real the organ harvesting is in South Florida, not to mention the people robbing graves and selling human bones for money, makes you not want to talk to anyone down there. This was years ago, but I'm sure nothing has changed. I was never that desperate, but there's always those people that have no bounds. I'm not homeless, but in my town there was an incident a few years ago. Some random guys set a homeless man on fire and killed him while he was asleep. The homeless man was an alcoholic and he used to drink a lot, so I suppose he was sleeping unconsciously. They poured him with gasoline and set him on fire. In the middle of the frocking night. Around 3 a.m. The next morning it was on the news. Very frocked up and unpleasant stuff, and I don't know if those people are caught and in prison at the moment. Be careful. You never know who's walking around freely nowadays. My brother was homeless by choice. Would just hitchhike or hop trains and travel around the U.S. He was normally smart about it, but when Colorado got marijuana legalized he stopped off there. Middle of winter. He called me and asked for a bus ticket. Had 2 guys freeze to death in this little camp he was in. He stuck to Florida in the winters after that. Guy grabbed me by my hood when I wouldn't give him money. I ended up beating him down pretty badly and broke my pinky. I should specify that we were both homeless. And I tried walking away from the situation. He then grabbed the back of my hood while following me, which I then retaliated in a bad way. Different life entirely. Crazy to think about it now. Regularly met people in tremendous ongoing pain or even dying begging me not to call them an ambulance. Half of them wanted to die and the other half didn't want the debt. I was homeless in a major MI city. It isn't necessarily the violence that scared me, but how quickly everyone became desensitized to it and how little the general public cared. I slept by the river and every couple of days the dredge line patrol boats would go by and pull out body parts so they didn't get caught in the fish ladder. Would find myself talking to other homeless people saying, "Yep, they pulled 3 out this morning, and a few extra arms." Inevitability they said so and so was missing. One of them was probably him. All of it was just as casual as you can be. Like I was giving a weather report. I was homeless for a year with my mom. There were plenty of unsettling nights but we had each other in a car so I always felt we were better off. I found an opportunity to get a place with some friends my age but I couldn't take her with me. The scariest things were the nightmares and worry I had for her every day. She moved to the same town as me so I could see her, give her money, and text her constantly, but the thought of me not being there if something happened still gives me nightmares. The scariest thing is how predatory normal-seeming men are. So many men offering a ride, a shower, a place to sleep for a night, dinner. But always 6 is the end goal, expectation. Some were blatant but some surprised me. COVID-19 probably now. But when I was homeless, stabbings were the scariest thing to witness. Also saw a man get his fingers chopped off by a frocking crackhead that was fighting the evil with a samurai sword. Cops shot the guy dead because they got attacked. I don't know man, it was all crazy down on Wilkins Avenue in Baltimore. I keep reading. I wasn't really homeless. Followed by I was living in a tent or sleeping in my car. Yes. You were homeless. Category 1 in fact. Homelessness isn't a mentality. It's a sleeping arrangement. Wasn't all that scary really. Just a frocked up situation. I was homeless in Phoenix. About 2,000 miles from anyone I knew. Was also in active heroin addiction at the time. Anyway, I had this spot in the park where I'd always sleep. Everybody knew it was my spot. Other homeless. So anyway. One night these tweakers are up making a ton of noise, yelling at each other and yelling at the air. I had work the next morning. So I went to the one dude I kind of knew to ask him to please move their arguments away from the area. Next thing I know all 3 attacked me. Was able to fight them off but got stabbed in my hand pretty badly. Had to have multiple surgeries. Nazis, wannabe Nazis. I don't know if it was just where I'm from, but almost every homeless person I interacted with was somehow connected to a Nazi organization. I was sleeping on a bench at a bus stop when I saw 3 hooded men take a tire iron to someone's car, then proceeded to kidnap whoever was in the car. I saw a man with harpoon fight another man with nunchucks in the middle of Phillips HWY in 2013. The effing cops, and rattlesnakes. Especially the pygmy rattlesnakes. So small, so camouflaged, and the cops, even without their brutality, could destroy everything I was working for. Saving money to get off the street by working 60 hours a week. They could take my job, my money, my bicycle, my other possessions anytime they wanted. I was homeless after 9/11. They. Sarasota County, Florida. Sarasota did this to me twice. One of the 2 times I caught tuberculosis in their jail and almost died. They were the single biggest threat to my survival. I got stalked and harassed for 3 months while living in a homeless shelter. Started with me helping out another person who got moved in. I found out they lied to me about the reason they needed help and called them out on it. Which in hindsight, was a mistake. From that point they'd try breaking into my room, sending their friends round to intimidate me. Wait outside the property by my window for all hours of the day. It was one of the scariest things I've had to go through, but there was so much going on in those projects that made the situation unsafe. On top of that, I'm so fortunate to not be in that position anymore. I used to sleep under an old bandstand at the park in my old town, and one night as I was coming out to have a cigarette, I saw a group of homeless teenagers arguing until suddenly a fight broke out and one of the kids shoved another onto the road, and next thing, an SUV truck came speeding along and frocking annihilated the kid on the road. 1 second he was trying to stand back up, the next he was just gone. The sound was not the thump you hear in movies. More like a wet pillowcase full of sponges and bones being hit with a steel bat maybe. The kid went under the frocking vehicle and, sorry if this sounds like I'm not taking it seriously, I just can't think of a better way to describe it. Suddenly became nothing but a long smear on the road and a heap of meat, hair and gristle. What's with all the psychopath teenagers on this thread? What in the frocking frock? Being herded into a van because this guy was running through the camp shooting at people in the tents. Then the shooter got in the van and we saw that it was mostly young kids in the van. We were trafficked up and down the coast for months before they pissed off some cartel guys and they got beat up and the van was set on fire. We crossed the border back towards home with this nice couple and worked on a farm with them for a while. Not homeless, but in the mid-90s in South Dallas I saw a pack of stray dogs attack a homeless guy. He had just gotten some food when the dogs circled in and attacked him so one of the dogs could grab the food. By the time I circled back, the workers at a convenience store chased off the dogs and called an ambulance. We made sure he had some food before the paramedics got there. Went into this forum with an open mind and got hit with real life. I was only homeless for a little bit and I also live in New Zealand, which is generally pretty safe. But I was living in my car and holy FK, so many people crash into your car on a daily basis and you have no idea unless you're in it sleeping. That and being female, so I had to make sure no one could see me in the car or make sure I am in a populated area where people will be curious if they hear something off. AKA super white neighborhoods. I am a lucky person. Nothing bad happened to me while I was forced to live in my car. It could have, but it didn't, and I am grateful to God every day. Me and a few others ended up traveling with a guy named Killer Mike, which wasn't an unusual moniker because a lot of travelers adopt or acquire street names. Killer Mike was a chill guy. He played banjo and even shared his beers with us. We traveled south for a few days and split off. We went to Chattanooga and Mike went westwardly a few weeks later, maybe even a month. We all heard that Killer Mike had been on a spree, traveling around the country killing his fellow travelers and robbing them. He had been wanted for a long time and was finally arrested in New Mexico for killing as many as 10 people. This didn't happen to me. Likewise, I didn't know the gentleman involved. I live in a very small town. We don't get homeless people. I've only ever seen one in this town. Why entire life? I'm 33. A couple years an older dude showed up and set up. I don't know where he came from, but he was gone within a week. He died because 3 children in probably grade 9 or 10 drenched him in gasoline and set him on fire while he slept. Horrifying. And yes, they were arrested quick. Whatever happened to them? I don't know. I was homeless in Arizona, Mesa. This other homeless kid I met, I didn't really know anyone there. He told me I shouldn't sleep out in the open anymore and told me how he sleeps on the roofs of gas stations and to easily get up on most of them. I thought this was genius, and you can leave your stuff because no one goes up there. After him telling me this, he says that people have been going around and lighting plastic bags on fire and throwing the bags onto sleeping homeless people. A few had accelerants poured on them before the molten plastic. People are frocking sick. Once when I was on the streets, a really creepy ghoulish-looking freak asked me if I wanted to see his treasure. He carried a box. I said, okay, out of politeness. He opened it and there was severed fingers, a dead kitten, some teeth, and I'm pretty sure a penis, along with some other stuff I didn't look long enough to identify. He smiled really big and proudly proclaimed that he learned to use a box with a lid to keep the maggots away. I literally turned and ran away, sprinted faster than I knew I was capable. I heard him laughing as I ran.